Low carb, lagi nating naririnig, nakikita natin sa mga videos, maybe nabasa natin, maybe narinig natin sa mga kaibigan. Ano ba yung low carb na yan? Most of the time, low carb is usually done with fasting. So, maaring narinig nyo na rin ang terms na LCIF, so low carb intermittent fasting, or yung LCF, low carb fasting. Pero ang tanong ng karamihan, ano nga ba yung low carb na yan? And it's a very good question kasi dapat dyan talaga tayo mag-start. Ito po si Dr. Iris, Filipino-Canadian medical doctor, nakabase dito sa Vancouver, dito sa Canada. At gusto kong i-share sa mga kababayan ko anywhere in the world, you may be ang mga guidelines na fina-follow namin dito. Hindi lang dito rin, pero kahit sa US, kahit sa Australia, kahit pa po sa Europe, ito yung mga evidence-based guidelines na kasalukuyang nire-recommenda na po ng mga iba't ibang associations like heart associations, diabetes associations. And ito po yung patungkol sa optimizing yung ating mga lifestyle choices. So lifestyle modification po bilang tugon, bilang first step kapag tayo ay nagkakaroon ng diagnosis ng mga lifestyle-related diseases. So ano-ano yung mga yan? High blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, fatty liver, even things like PCOS. So, kailangan malaman natin din ito kasi ito ay isang napaka-natural na pamamaraan at hindi lamang yan. Hindi magastos, walang side effects, and certainly pwedeng gawin ng kahit sino. Yung mga merong mga gamot or malalang sakit, kailangan ng patnubay ng doctor para gawin ito pero certainly doable. So, low carb, let's start off with the definition po. Pag sinabing low carb, mababa ang carb. Ano nga ba yung carb? Carb stands for carbohydrates. Isa sa 3 macronutrients. So pag sinabi nating macro, kailangang malaki. So usually found in big amounts sa diet natin, yung 3 macronutrients na yan, proteins, fats, at carbohydrates. So carbohydrates yung ating fino-focus dyan sa low carb lifestyle. So mababa na carbohydrates. Gaano kababa? If we look at the research, it's saying na 130 grams of net carb per day. Ano yung net carb na yan? Yan ang suma total na nakakainin mong carb sa isang araw. So 130 grams na net carb, it means total carbohydrates minus the fiber dahil ang fiber hindi naman na-absorb. So yung carbohydrate lang na ma-absorb yung binibilang natin. So ano yung mga iba't ibang levels ng paglo-low carb? Meron tayong 3 levels. Unang level is yung tinatawag na ketogenic, which is 20 grams or less net carb per day. Meron tayong moderate low carb, which is 50 grams or less net carb per day. And may liberal, which is 100 grams of net carb per day. Bakit hindi 130? Well, I am a diet doctor practitioner, so I'm following yung guidelines nila. But also dahil tayo mga Pilipino, maliliit yung build natin. So the 130 grams na nakalagay sa literature na ginagamit sa research is mainly conducted sa mga ibang lahi po. Siyempre mas malalaki sila. Tayong mga Pinoy, mas maliliit yung build natin. So I think I'm gonna follow yung nire-recommend ni diet doctor, which is yung liberal niya is up to 100 grams net carb per day. So dito sa ating platform, we are advocating for low carb in the amount of 50 grams and less. So pasok dyan yung ating ketogenic and yung ating moderate low carb. So ngayon, paano malalaman kung ilan nga ba ang net carb per day? Iba't ibang pamamaraan. Unang-una, kung ang pagkain ay walang label, and hopefully wala dahil ito ay natural at whole food, then maaari tayong gumamit ng mga apps. Maraming mga sites kung saan tatype nyo lang net carb and then kung ano man yung kinain ninyo and lalabas doon yung net carb. For example, broccoli, net carb, itype ninyo, lalabas yung net carb. So, iba't ibang apps, ayan, nakalista po sila. Hanapin lang natin doon yung net carb ng kinakain and isuma total natin yung amounts kasi nakalagay din doon yung amount. For example, per 1 cup, ilan ang net carb niyan. Pag nasuma total natin yan for the day, it'll give us our net carb allowance for the day. Malalaman mo kung pasok, yung meal combination na ginawa mo, pasok doon sa pinupuntirya mong net carb allowance per day, which is hopefully 50 grams and less per day. So, kapag na-meet natin ang basic criteria na yan, then we can say na tayo ay naglo-low carb na. Isang mahalagang bagay na kailangang malaman, pagdating sa carbohydrates, not all carbs are created equal. Ibig sabihin, merong mga carbohydrates that will have higher net carb content, merong mga carbohydrates that will have lower net carb content. So, isa pa sa mga pamamaraan kung paano natin malalaman is by using our food guide. Meron tayong food guide, madadownload yan sa levelupwithdriris.com, and isa itong PDF guide kung saan para siyang traffic light, merong go section, merong pause at stop. Yung gusto nating piliin ng mga pagkain, dapat nandun sa go section. Dahil dyan ay mga mabababa ang net carb ng mga pagkain na nakalista. So we can choose, make sure na meron tayong proteins and meron tayong fat and yung carbs optional. Bakit po? Dahil ang carbs po are not essential. Ibig sabihin, pwede tayong mabuhay kahit walang carbs. Tama po ang narinig ninyo. Bakit ganyan? Kasi ang carbs, pwede natin siyang ma-synthesize or magawa from the raw material na proteins and fats. So yung glucose, yung energy unit na yan, na nagiging breakdown product ng carbs, maaaring magawa yan from proteins and fats. And in that way, hindi mo talaga kailangan ng carbs. Ako personally, I still add yung mga low net carb vegetables because I like the fiber. Gusto ko po yung bulking effect niya kasi isa sa mga mapapansin pag naglo-low carb at fasting ay yung pagdumi natin dadalang, feeling mo constipated ka pero hindi naman talaga. It's just because you have less bulk. Hindi ka ganun kadalas magugutom. So, most of the people in our community are only eating 1 to 2 times a day. So, syempre less bulk. Then, akala mo constipated ka, pero hindi naman talaga. So, I eat more net carb veggies than other people, low net carb veggies, because I like the fiber. So, yun po. And of course, yung mga phytonutrients na matatagpuan natin sa mga plants. But that's my own personal preference. I still keep to below 50 grams of net carb. I don't do keto, I do mainly yung moderate low carb dahil I exercise, I do regular movements po, I build muscles, and so I need to have higher net carb allowance para po dyan. But you certainly have the choice, depende sa inyong health goals, depende sa inyong weight loss goals, kung alin ang susundan ninyo. So yun yung isang kailangan malaman na hindi lahat ng mga carbohydrates ay magkakaparehas. Karamihan ng nakalista sa ating go section ay mga above ground na mga uri ng carbs, mga green leafy vegetables, mababa talaga ang net carb content. Mga bagay na nakalista doon sa ating pause section are things that are higher, yung mga starch components po nila. So, andyan yung makikita nyo, meron dyan yung mga carrots, meron dyan yung mga iba pang proteins na carbs din, like lentils. So, we want moderation lamang dito dahil yun nga, mas mataas ang net carb content. So, kailangan gamitin po yung ating food guide bilang gabay. So, practically speaking, paano natin gagawin yung pag-low carb lifestyle? Well, I highly recommend na gawin natin yung tinatawag na pantry edit. Ito yung titignan natin yung mga bagay-bagay na nasa bahay natin, maybe nasa fridge, maybe nasa pantry natin. Kukuha tayo ng garbage bag, tapos lahat ng mga pagkain na nandun sa stop section, itatapon natin. And don't be manghinayang, huwag manghihinayang. Kasi lahat ng mga pagkain na nandun are there for a reason. They're not good for you. So, itapon natin lahat. Let's get rid of them. Kapag out of sight, out of mind po, kapag wala na, di wala ng temptation. And from here on, we will restock with whole foods, with unprocessed foods, most of the time, hopefully, foods that are on our list. Dahil ito yung makakatulong sa atin to create our meal combinations na hindi na tayo matitempt dahil tayo nag-pantry edit na. And then another practical aspect of creating or following the low-carb lifestyle is knowing how to create a low-carb plate. Paano ba ginagawa yan? Well, there are a few important things to note. Unang-una, proteins and fats are essential. So, dun tayo magsisimula. Proteins, you have a protein requirement. It is 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilogram body weight per day. Ang gagamitin natin is yung gitna, 1.5 grams per kilogram for in most cases. Depende sa pangangailangan. Bakit mas mataas yung requirement na nami-mention ko? It's because I highly encourage you to move regularly. I encourage you to build muscles. And in that case, pag tayo nagma-muscle building, kailangan natin ng mas maraming protina kasi ito ang building blocks ng muscles. And proteins are essential, so you have to meet your protein requirements. So for example, you're a 50 kilogram woman, kailangan mo ng 1.5 grams per kilogram protein per day. That'll give you 75 grams of total allowance ng protein per day. So dun ka mag-start. Kapag hindi mo na meet yung iyong requirement for protein, ang mangyayari dyan, number 1, you will get muscle wasting. Kasi kulang na yung building block, mangangayayat ka, kukuha sa muscle. Number 2, maaring manghina ka. You can get some weakness, you can feel na parang hindi okay sa iyo yung paglo-low carb kasi kulang ka sa proteins. Number 3, you will not feel satisfied. Protein acts on yung leptin, yung hormone that dictates na busog na tayo. So the hormone of satiety. Kapag hindi enough ang protein intake mo, yung leptin hindi siya gagana ng tama. So then you always feel hungry. And kapag hindi mo pa alam kung bakit, then you start reaching for high net carb food ulit. So very important to first meet our protein requirement. And then yung ating fat requirement, ito depende sa stage ng journey, depende sa goals mo. If malayo ka pa doon sa goal mo or matindi yung medical condition mong kailangan i-reverse, stick to more natural sources ng fats na mainly plant-based or fish-based. So ito yung mga galing sa olive, so olive oil, coconut oil, macadamia, avocado, mga ganyan po, and fish-based na sources ng fat. Pwede ka rin kumuha ng source ng fat doon sa ating moderate section, pero in moderation lang, dahil may pinagdaan ng mga proseso. So these are things like butter, for example. These are things like yung mga meats, taba ng meats, kasi combined din yan with proteins and fats. Yung mga creams, yung mga ganyan po, in moderation. And the third component ng low carb plate is of course the carbs. So if like me, gusto mo magkaroon ng fiber, then choose from the low net carb vegetable list. Yung mga low net carb choices na yan, green leafy vegetables, is pretty good to have on your plate. Nakakadagdag din siya sa feeling of fullness and of course dun sa ating yung daily natin ng mga bowel movement, nakakatulong siya doon. Again, carbs are not essential, but when you eat itong mga plant-based na low net carb na pagkain, then it can also help you with yung mga micronutrients, phytonutrients. So yun yung ikatlong component. Ika-apat na component ng low carb plate, make sure that it is nutrient dense. Na yung mga pagkain na pinipili mo, although maliit na amount lamang, siksik sa mga nutrients, puno ng macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carb, kung maaari, at meron ding vitamins and minerals, yung mga micronutrients. So ano yung mga halimbawa ng mga nutrient dense choices na yan? Meat, eggs, nuts, yan yung mga nutrient dense choices natin. So yun yung requirement natin. So the fourth requirement is nutrient dense meals. Then fifth requirement, it has to be satisfying, masarap naman, right? And that's why meron tayong access doon sa ating moderate, sa ating pause list, dahil doon makikita natin yung mga flavorings, mga bagay-bagay pwede nating i-add sa ating meals para meron siyang variety at minsan mas palatable. So go ahead and make your meals satisfying as long as pasok doon sa list. And then finally, look at your plate and ask yourself, low carb pa rin ba to? That's the final criteria. Look at the net carb allowance ng ginawa ninyong meal. And then, kung masasagot nyo na oo lahat yun, then there you go. You have a really good low carb plate. That's how you make a low carb plate. One final word po sa lifestyle na ito, maraming hindi naniniwala kasi sinasabi nila sa start lang nag-work. But what I will say is something to guide you about this lifestyle. Think about it as a marathon. Hindi po siya sprint. Maaring makakita kayo ng effects ng mabilisan. That's great. And maaring ma-reverse ninyo ang inyong mga medical conditions ng mabilisan. However, it's important to know that this is a lifestyle. Isa itong marathon. Hindi siya mabilisan, i-adapt natin ito, and hopefully ito na yung susundan natin for life. Dahil itong klaseng lifestyle naman talagang ito ang tunay na lifestyle ng ating mga ninuno. Remember, noong panahon, wala namang agriculture. So, wala silang capacity na mag-harvest, magtanim ng mga grains. Yung ating ancient, yung ating mga ninuno noon, ang kanila talagang kinakain are mainly proteins and fats. The fats that come with the protein, which is usually the animals. Hindi pa uso nun yung agriculture, hindi pa uso nun yung mga prutas nun sa season lamang. Hindi rin uso nun yung farming. So, anong nangyayari is they really mainly survived on low carb na way of eating. So, kayang-kaya din natin gawin yan. And ngayon na alam na natin that carbs are not essential, palagay na yung loob natin na we will still be able to meet all of our requirements sa pagkain lamang ng proteins and fats. The good thing is, meron na tayong flexibility, may access na rin tayo sa low net carb na mga pagkain na nandyan sa ating food guide. So hopefully po naliwanagan kayo tungkol dito sa lifestyle na ito. Ito ay isa sa mga pinakamabisa at natural na pamamaraan para ma-reverse ang mga medical conditions at para mag-lose weight naturally.